Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a massive legal shakeup that completely reshaped corporate India, the Companies Act of 2013. And look, this wasn't just some minor update. This was a ground-up rewrite of the entire rulebook for businesses. It basically set a brand new foundation for one of the fastest-growing economies on the planet. So let's get into it and figure out what really changed and, more importantly, why you should care.
But before we dive into all the legal jargon, let's just start with a really fundamental question. It's a question this entire act is built around. We talk about companies like they're actual entities. We say they can own property, they can sue people, they could be sued. But how? How is that even possible? What is the legal magic that gives a pile of assets and a group of people a life of its very own?
Okay, to really get a sense of just how big a deal this 2013 act was, you've got to see the before and after. On the left, that's the old rulebook from 1956, 13 parts, 658 sections. And on the right, the new 2013 Act. It's got 29 chapters, but only 470 sections. So it's not just that the numbers changed, the entire structure was totally reimagined to make more sense for the way business actually works today.
Right. That leads to the really obvious question. Why? Why go through all this trouble? Why scrap a law that had been doing the job for more than half a century?
Well, here's the best way to think about it. That old 1956 law was designed for a totally different world. Since then, India's economy just exploded. You had globalization, incredible new technologies, super complex financial markets. The country needed a new legal framework that could actually handle all of that. Trying to run a modern economy on that old law was like trying to run the latest app on a computer from the 90s. It was slow, clunky, and just not going to work. Now, you don't just whip up a new rulebook like this overnight. It was a whole journey. As you can see here, it kicked off in the Lok Sabha in late 2012, then moved through the Rajya Sabha, got the president's official sign-off in August 2013, and finally went into effect a month later. This whole step-by-step process really shows you just how important and carefully considered these changes were.
Okay, so we know why the law was needed. Now for the good stuff. What actually changed? What new ideas did this act bring to the table? This is really where you see the huge shift in thinking about how a company should be run.
All right, so the act brought in something like 30 major new concepts, which is a lot. But don't worry, we can boil the most important ones down to three big themes. First, a huge focus on better governance. Second, a massive push for more accountability. And third, creating new, modern business structures that actually fit the world we live in.
First up, governance. The act got really specific about who's in the driver's seat. For the first time, it mandated diversity, requiring at least one woman on the board. It made sure someone was physically present by requiring at least one director to be in India for over half the year. For publicly listed companies, it demanded outside perspective. A full third of the board had to be independent. And it finally put a formal definition on who the key managerial personnel are, making it crystal clear who's actually in charge.
Next up, accountability. This act created some powerful new tools to keep everyone honest. For instance, auditors now have to be rotated out every few years, just to make sure they don't get too comfortable with the company they're supposed to be watching. The Serious Fraud Investigation Office was given some real teeth, and this is a big one, it introduced class action suits, giving small shareholders a way to band together and fight back against bad management.
Now, for what might be one of the most talked about changes, not just in India but around the world. For the very first time, the laws said that certain companies must spend 2% of their average profits on corporate social responsibility. This was a total game changer. CSR went from being a nice voluntary thing companies did for good PR to a mandatory legal obligation.
And finally, the law caught up with how business is actually done now. It introduced the one-person company, or OPC, which is huge for solo entrepreneurs who want the legal protection of a company structure. It pushed everything online with e-governance, and it created clear rules for complex modern stuff like merging with a foreign company or settling disputes without a massive court battle.
So all of this brings us back to that first question we asked, and to this really fascinating legal concept that's at the heart of the whole law, the weird, unique identity of a company. It's a person, but a very, very specific kind of person.
This definition right here is the whole ballgame. The law treats a company as an artificial person. It's created by law, not by nature. And this idea, this legal fiction, is what gives it a totally separate identity from its owners. It's what allows it to live forever, that's the perpetual succession part, and to act like a single cohesive thing.
But in law,
Words matter a lot. So not every business entity is a company under this act. A company is one that's specifically incorporated in India. Body corporate is a much wider umbrella. It includes all those Indian companies, but it also includes foreign giants like Microsoft or Google. So think of it this way. An Indian company is a body corporate, but not every body corporate is an Indian company.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Because a company is a legal person, it's not a citizen. What does that mean? Well, it means it gets some of the fundamental rights that all persons have, like the right to equality before the law. But, and this is crucial, it does not get the rights that are reserved only for citizens, like the freedom of speech. A company can't just say whatever it wants.
Okay, so if a company is its own person, what's the wall that separates it from the actual people who own and run it? And more importantly, can that wall ever come down? That brings us to this incredible concept called the corporate veil. This separation is what lawyers call the corporate veil. It's one of the cornerstones of corporate law. It's like a metaphorical shield between the company's debts and problems and the personal bank accounts of its owners. This is the whole idea behind limited liability, and it's what gives people the confidence to invest and take business risks.
But, and this is a huge but, that veil is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It offers protection, but it's not absolute. If the owners start using the company's structure to commit fraud or do something seriously wrong, the courts can step in. They can literally pierce the veil, ignore the company's separate identity, and go right after the people behind it, holding them personally responsible for the mess.
All right, so let's pull all these different threads together. We've talked about the new rules, the new business structures, and these core legal ideas. But what was the big picture? What was this whole thing really about?
When you boil it all down, this act wasn't just a legal spring cleaning. It was a mission. The whole point was to build a business world with way more transparency and accountability, to seriously level up corporate governance, to give real protection to all investors, especially the little guys, and to get Indian corporate law in sync with the best practices around the globe.
So ultimately, you can think of this law as that modern operating system we talked about earlier. It's the code that dictates how business is supposed to be run legally and ethically in India today. It's a framework built for the messy, complex, and exciting global economy of the 21st century, not the one from the 1950s.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. This act was a monumental leap forward, totally designed for the world of 2013. But things are moving faster than ever. With AI changing everything, with decentralized finance, with all these new global challenges, it makes you wonder, right? What will the next great rulebook for business even look like?